It's so close. For thousands of years, man has found comfort in its presence. It's been a beacon for nocturnal travelers, a timekeeper for farmers, and a location finder for sailors at sea. For some cultures, it's even been a god. It's the only cosmic body ever visited by human beings. And today, NASA is planning a permanent outpost there. But how did it get there in the first place? How did the moon come to be? The answer is more astounding and spectacular than most residents of Earth have ever imagined. At last count, over 150 moons populate our solar system. Neptune claims 13 of them. Saturn has 48. And Jupiter hosts an astounding 62. Earth, on the other hand, has just one. But it's a special one. Our moon, Luna, as the Romans named it, is remarkable in its size. It is by no means the largest moon in the solar system. Several others are bigger. One of Saturn's moons, Titan, for instance, is twice the size. But our moon is the largest in relation to its host planet.
It's a quarter the size of the Earth. It's really big compared to the Earth. If you look through a telescope at the Earth from a distance, you'd see the Earth and this other big thing. If you look at Jupiter or any other planet, you got the big planet and then little tiny moons right next to it. So our moon is so much bigger, and it's the only one of the now 8 planets that has that situation.
The relative sizes of the two bodies are close enough that some astronomers go so far as to refer to the Earth-Moon system as a double planet. The mean distance from the Earth to the Moon is 234,000 miles, a 3-day flight through space. Luna's diameter is roughly 1/4 the size of Earth's, measuring 2,160 miles. A single day on the Moon is the equivalent of 27.3 Earth days. This is because one side of the Moon permanently faces us. Luna is phase-locked with our planet. So the Moon must fully orbit the Earth in order to make one complete rotation on its axis. Sort of like children in a game of Ring Around the Rosie. They always face inward as they hold hands and move in a circle. Yet as closely related as the Moon is to our Earth, it would only take a brief visit to Luna to make it quite clear that it is in fact a very different world from our planet. And an exceedingly dangerous place.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
There's no air, of course, so you need your spacesuit.
Indeed, the Moon has absolutely no atmosphere at all. So there is nothing to carry sound waves. If you were standing on the Moon with a friend and tried to converse, the person wouldn't be able to hear you, except by radio.
I was strolling on the moon one day in the merry, merry month of December.
No atmosphere also means that there are no air molecules to scatter light from the sun. So the sky is always black. And the landscape does little to help brighten the scene.
Kind of monochromatic, you know, not much color there. The rocks are mostly gray-brown colors. It's maybe a little warmer tone in one direction, maybe toward the sun, and cooler tones, grayer tones looking in other directions, but not so colorful.
Extreme temperatures would also add to the unpleasantness of a visit. The swings between hot and cold are brutal, from 270 degrees above zero at midday to 240 degrees below zero at night. Even the moon's low gravity, just 1/6 of Earth's, could present a hazard to a tourist. A reality the Apollo astronauts kept at the tops of their minds during their many moonwalks.
But they realized that beyond the thickness of their visor in their spacesuit was death. Should they do something and fall into a rock and lose their footing and fall and hit an outcrop, this visor could be cracked, exposed to the lunar vacuum. We would have had a serious situation on our hands.
But while a spacesuit could protect lunar tourists against the vacuum of space, a lack of oxygen, temperature extremes, and lethal solar radiation, a potential hazard a spacesuit would do little to protect against is high-velocity micrometeorites. They pummel the lunar surface frequently.
Tiny meteorites, the little ones that burn up in our atmosphere and make shooting stars, there's no atmosphere on the moon. They're coming right down, hitting the surface.
They pulverize the lunar surface, generating a dusty blanket of gravel-like material called regolith. Dr. Amanda Hendricks studies the moon at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
This plant here is kind of a regolith factory. It's ground up rock is what it is. The timescales at this gravel mill are a lot faster. Here, it's made in less than an hour. But on the moon, it is the result of more than 4 billion years of bombardment by meteoroids and micrometeoroids raining in on the surface and breaking up the rock.
Like the product of this gravel mill, lunar regolith has formed in a variety of grain sizes, from large rocks to fine dust.
This very fine dust is familiar to us from Apollo images that were seen of astronauts' footprints in the dust. It's very fine, and so fine, in fact, that the astronauts had problems with it, sticking to their spacesuits, getting into the equipment, and it can end up causing a bit of a problem.
Really big meteorites have also hit the moon in the past. In fact, these massive impacts are responsible for the dark circular regions on the lunar surface, the shapes that to many observers seem to be arranged like the eyes, nose, and mouth of a human face. They make up the illusion of the man on the moon. They blasted huge basins in the moon's surface. Some of them are 700 miles across. Dark lava eventually burst through at the impact points and flooded the basins. Today, we call these dark regions Maria, the Latin word for seas. This dates back to the 17th century when Renaissance-era observers looked up at the moon. They speculated that the dark areas might be oceans, and astronomers of the time gave the many dark spots, or seas, whimsical names.
The seas are all named after effects that were once attributed to the moon. So you have the Sea of Storms, and the Sea of Crises, and the Sea of Tranquility, and so forth.
Some of the younger impact basins have had less time to erode, so their features are still relatively crisp. One in particular is called Mare Orientale, or the Eastern Sea. It's some 600 miles across, and the impact that created it was so massive and direct, the result looks very much like the bullseye on a target.
This Orientale scar is kind of like a bullet shot into glass, where you see all the sort of rings around it and fractures going out. People have often said if that had been on the side facing directly toward the Earth, we might have had a whole different mythology about the moon, because it would have looked like a big eye staring at us.
Three concentric rings of mountain ranges surround Mare Orientale, and some of the peaks rise to several thousand feet. They're all effects of the monster impact.
When we see mountain ranges on the Earth, they're mostly caused first by the continents moving around, crashing into each other very slowly, buckling up and creating mountain ranges, which then erode into all the spectacular shapes that we see, the Matterhorn and so forth, from water erosion.
On the moon, there are no continental plate tectonics. The surface is static.
Yet you still have mountains on the moon. And the reason is that those big impact basins, and that's a big explosion, excavates a pit, throws material up on the outside, so you have these rings of mountains, arcs of mountains that surround the impact sites. But they're impact features. Again, they're caused by the external forces, not the internal forces.
Another notable impact crater, much smaller than Mare Orientale, but every bit as spectacular, is Tycho. Named after a prominent 17th century Danish astronomer, this impact feature is located in the southwestern quadrant of the moon's near side.
It's in the bright area. You can almost see it with your naked eye. And when that explosion happened, as with many other craters, it shot out jets of bright, powdery dust. So there are these rays that go out from it. It's very striking.
The rays of dusty, ejected material extend some 900 miles from the Tycho impact site. A mountain of debris also rises from the center of the crater. This is a result of recoil from the asteroid strike. Some of the highly compressed material at the center of the impact site springs outward once the impacting body either ricochets or disintegrates. But long before any of the moon's specific features could be discerned through sophisticated telescopes and space travel, careful observation of lunar behavior and appearance was still vitally important to Earth dwellers. For 15,000 years at least, man revered the moon as a source of light, as a navigational guide, as a reference in agricultural pursuits, and most of all, as a convenient timekeeper. In the days before our modern systems, timekeeping was no simple task. Early timekeepers had two choices. They could monitor the sun or the moon.
If you think about trying to keep track of dates, if you use a solar calendar like we do nowadays, there are 365 days in a year, and that's an awful lot of days to keep track of. And it's not something that the ordinary person can do very well. Compare that with a lunar calendar. Everybody can tell when the full moon is, when the new moon is. You don't see the moon at new moon. You see it, it's big and round at full moon, so it's easy to tell. There are only 28 to 29 days in a lunar cycle, so it's easy to count them. And so most societies actually start out with a lunar calendar.
Early observers of the moon also recognized that our planetary neighbor has a very real physical effect on the Earth itself. The moon is responsible for the rise and fall of our ocean tides.
If we think of the moon as being this tennis ball and the Earth as being this football, okay, the tides are caused by the moon's gravitational attraction. So it's obvious, okay, so the moon kind of pulls the Earth's water towards it. And so this creates a slight bulge in the direction of the moon. What's less obvious is there's also a bulge in the direction away from the moon. So there's, in fact, 2 high tides every day. The other high tide you can think of as being caused by the Earth's centripetal force. The Earth and the moon are both rotating around, and that causes the water on the far side to also move out.
An extreme illustration of the difference between high and low tides can be found along the shore of Canada's Bay of Fundy. The water level from high tide to low tide drops an astounding 55 feet. For some forms of life on Earth, the advance and retreat of the tides creates useful habitats. But another of the moon's gravitational effects on our planet is directly responsible for nothing less than the continued survival of terrestrial life itself. The moon stabilizes Earth's climate. The gravitational effect of the moon keeps the degree of tilt in the Earth's rotational axis constant. This tilt is what maintains the repeatable cycle of seasons as the Earth orbits the sun. Over the millennia, with the moon's prominent and constant presence in our night sky, men ultimately began to speculate on its origin. How did it form? How did the moon come to be? In 455 BCE, the Greek scholar Anaxagoras theorized that the moon was simply a rock that was flung off by the Earth. Most of his contemporaries, on the other hand, were convinced that the moon was a god, or maybe a huge ball of fire. So Anaxagoras' notion did not get much traction. Quiet speculation no doubt continued, but no hard information about the moon came until 1609, when Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei pointed one of the first telescopes at the moon and recognized that he was looking at a landscape, the terrain of another world.
When you look at the moon through a telescope, it looks completely different from the way it looks to the naked eye. Instead of looking flat the way it does to the naked eye, it really looks round, and you can see the shadow